We're going to start our next session. Hope everyone is hanging in there. Having a good time? Yeah? Anyone? Are you having a good time so far? Yeah? Okay. So for our next session, I'm very excited to welcome Claire Chang. Claire is the founder and managing director of IgniteXL, which is a Silicon Valley-based accelerator or seed fund focusing on early stage startups from Korea and Asia. Having worked with companies from abroad for over 2 decades, Claire understands the unique challenges entrepreneurs face as they bring new ideas, products, and services to the US market. Claire serves as a chair of Asian Business League of San Francisco, currently serving as vice chair for SF Seoul Sister City Committee, and a board member at SCBCC. So she's going to tell you all about that really soon, so it's really my pleasure to introduce Claire.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, good afternoon. How's this? Can you hear me all the way in the back? No? Okay. Let's try. Should I turn this off? Can you hear me better in the back? Okay, great. All right. Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Google, for hosting this event and inviting me to speak with you. You know, you have a lot of females in the room with the bathroom stalls. All of them ran out of toilet papers. So it's wonderful to be here. What an honor to be here. Let's see. So when I was asked to speak at this Female Founder Summit, without a doubt, I just basically said, of course, yes. I said yes in a heartbeat, because it is definitely a topic that's dear to my heart. But when I sat down to start thinking about, okay, so what am I going to talk about? You know, I don't have a wild success story to share yet. It's still in the process of making. And I looked at the agenda and I noticed we have a lot of experts, industry experts, specialists, talking about specific business angles. So I thought, you know, why don't I share my experience and what I have learned and what I'm still learning as a female founder, as a mother, as a single mother, as a leader who's led women leadership programs, to sort of share my experience with you from sort of the unique lens that I've experienced the world. So with that, and the 3 pillars that's shaped my experience are obviously my personal journey, as well as the nonprofit Asian Business League of San Francisco, where I had co-developed You Are the CEO of You, which was really to empower the Asian American women leaders. And then the 3rd pillar is my current position as the managing director for an accelerator in a seed fund that I run, IgniteXL. So I'll go through each one as my background, and then I'll go through sort of the 5 lessons that I've learned, I'm still learning. Okay. So my unique lens to the world really starts out with me coming from Korea. Our family immigrated to the US when I was 12 years old. And unlike others who may have been scared of going to a completely new place, I was really excited. I was excited to see the world. I've always been fascinated by different cultures, so it was an excitement to be coming to the US. But growing up, I was quite a rebel. I was on my way to UC Davis, but rather going to school, I decided I'm going to get married. I thought I found the love of my life. And I decided to get married, gave up school, and had 2 lovely children. And then got divorced, became a single mom. And then that's when my sort of career, I went back to school, and then that's when my career really started. The second pillar, being women, being Asian American here, I was very passionate in terms of leadership in our community, and so I had joined a nonprofit called Asian Business League of San Francisco, which is actually right here in the city. And as a chair, I had co-developed this program called You Are the CEO of You, which is really a leadership program to empower women in the mid-level management, and how do we get you to sort of break that glass ceiling and get to the top management level. And so we had worked with I believe over 60 different women since its beginning, which we started, I believe, back in 2008 or so. And I can tell you some examples from that later. And then, of course, what I'm currently doing as IgniteXL founder and managing director is to work with entrepreneurs coming from Korea and Asia. And I do work with quite a bit of women entrepreneurs as well. And so my experience working with entrepreneurs from outside of the US, as well as the women entrepreneurs, and my experience with them, my learnings with them, I will share with you. So, what I have learned along the way. Be aware, but don't accept. And I think it's really important for us to accept the fact that bias do exist. The sexism does exist. As long as we're living in a society where we know that sexism exists, we're going to be experiencing it. And I think it's important for us to recognize it. But recognizing doesn't mean that you stop. You basically figure out, okay, so how do I move beyond? And so, for example, if you're playing if you take on a manager role, you think about what are the things that as a manager that you will want to be perceived as. When we did the You Are the CEO of You program, we did basically an assessment, initial program. It was a 6-week program, and we would start out with a self-assessment. And one of the things we do talk about is what are the cultural values that brought up the way we think today. And oftentimes we would come across the fact that our Asian cultural values really brought us to think nurturing, we don't stand out, we support, but we don't really take the lead. So those rules, really, those values, once we recognize it, how do we really turn them into something that we can play to advantage in our role? One of our speakers, Leslie Chang, who is now retired, she talked about her experience when she became the Superior Court judge, that she had and I think she still does, but when she started, she had a very high-pitched voice. I can't mimic. But so it was an issue because as a judge, she needed to be taken seriously. But because of this high tone voice, she realized, okay, I'm going to have to take a voice lesson to really work on, to bring my voice tone down, so that when she's with her colleagues, as well as when she's presiding at the court, that she will be taken seriously. And so she worked on that to really work on her voice and how she talked, her tone, to make her, to have that sort of to be taken more seriously. another thing, another member of our program, also, she was a CFO and at a community bank here in San Francisco. And she would be sitting in the board meeting. But again, she had this, and this is something that we again assessed during the assessment. We recognized that of course she's an amazingly smart woman, but when she spoke, she would sort of bob her head. So, and when you're so passionate, when you're talking about the issues, you don't realize how you look. And so this was one of the things that we recognized early on, and so hey, you know, let's work on that. Let's work on when you are talking, when you're persuading, when you are conveying a message. Let's make sure that you are, you sit up and you speak with authority. Another example, and I think what really goes to show is that image does matter, because the bias does exist. That if we don't, we do need to take the extra effort. That's really what I'm trying to say, is that, you know what, regardless whether you like it or not, it does exist. And so if you want to claim that certain role, let's figure out what that role looks like and how you want to be perceived, and really work towards claiming that role. And this is another thing that we did a lot with the program, is bringing in a branding specialist, a personal branding specialist. And she even talked about how you dress, right? And even though, yes, we want to be individualized, we want to show how we are, just natural self, yet if you take on the leadership role, manager role, you really want to be taken seriously. And yes, regardless of whether you like it or not, people do judge you by how you dress. And so that was one of the things that we worked with each individual during the program as well. And another example, this was an executive who was in the financial sector, said that early on when he joined the company, he didn't have to wear, it was a pretty casual, but he didn't have to wear a tie. You could just wear an open shirt and a suit. But he would always wear a tie. And we're thinking, you know, why does that matter? But for him, he wanted to appear to be a leader from the get-go. And he worked his way up, of course, he worked hard, but especially being Asian American. And when you look at, let's say, the media, you know, Asian American male for the longest time was not looked upon as a leadership role. And so he really worked hard to convey the leadership image. And his sort of trick, or the way, was to wear a tie every day to work. And he, you know, is now the executive at one of the largest banks. Leverage your advantage. I sort of talked about taking the assessment and understanding what are the traits that you recognize as weaknesses and turning them to your advantage. I think we women are natural connectors. We are really good at relationship building. And I think that's something that we recognize early on, at least in our group, that, you know, that's a huge advantage in building your network. Recognizing these traits and really working towards your advantage was something that we worked on a lot. For me personally, I remember because I worked with entrepreneurs from Korea, or I would go to Korea to speak, and mostly I would be working, I would say 95% of the time, I'll be sitting in a room with older male in the room, and I would oftentimes be the only female. And for those of you who don't know, we have a very different dialect when it's female tone versus the male tone when you're speaking in Korean. And so I recognized early on that when I spoke Korean, my tone, my whole body language changed. I would have a higher pitched tone, and I would speak more softly, because that's how who spoke, female spoke, and it actually was a disadvantage for me. So as soon as I recognized that, I did something different. I basically would tell the men in the room, I would say, please feel free to speak Korean, but I actually feel more comfortable speaking English. I understand Korean, but I would like to speak English. And what that did, when I spoke English, my shoulder opened up, my voice had more authority, and then not only that, the CEOs in the room, because you spoke English, the respect just went up, right? So it sort of really made the playing field even. And that was just one of the tricks I learned early on, that when I'm dealing with, especially in Asia where it's very hierarchical culture, and you're female, you're really having to sort of, fight this upstream to really position yourself equally when you're dealing with these CEOs. So that was another, example of really figuring that out early on and really changing that dynamics. Another thing, I remember a good friend of mine who's a partner at a law firm always would tell me that whenever she's hiring associates, she sees the difference between the male attorney associates and female attorney associates. And female attorney associates, their ask for the salary is always lower. And she just could not figure, and even during the negotiation, female attorneys would never ask for more. And this was something that she would always go talk about when she's speaking to female, any kind of gathering, right? For me, maybe it's just because we feel like we don't want to be perceived as as greedy or whatever it is. I know exactly what that's like, right? But early on, when I had to negotiate my salary with my employer, my best friend basically told me, and I was a single mom. Remember, my career started after I got divorced. She's like, go in there and think of your kids, think of your babies. You are going to negotiate on behalf of your babies. And you know what? As soon as she said that, my whole attitude changed. It was no longer about me asking more money, but you know what? I need this. I deserve this. And ever since then, whenever I'm negotiating, of course my kids are now grown up. But back then, that really gave me the strength and just gave me a whole different attitude. So again, look at what you have, your surroundings, and how can you turn that into your advantage? Is something that I'd like to emphasize. I think, and this is something that I'm still struggling. This is a constant work in progress, where the biggest barrier that we put on ourselves is the self-doubt. I was crazy busy this week because we have our cohort. We have 10 entrepreneurs from Korea, and we had our demo day last week. We're also presenting at Levi Stadium today. They presented today, this morning. So I was really busy basically helping them prepare, and I'm like, oh my God, I have to go to Google Launchpad and I have to present as well. And I basically just barely got through just organizing my thoughts for this talk. And of course, all along I'm thinking, oh my gosh, am I really qualified to speak in front of all these wonderful women, right? You're always having this self-doubt. And I think for me, before I stand in front of all of you, really, again, not because I have some amazing success story to share, but because I'm older, hopefully I'm wiser, and that experiences that I've led in my journey, which is, I believe, somewhat unique, but hopefully it'll speak to some of you. And so I really had to kind of talk myself into this, right? And this happens all the time. I don't know about you, but even with my cohort, whenever I get the new cohort, I've got pretty much, I would say, 80% of them are male. And sometimes they're older than me, right? Most of the time. And so you really have to work yourself up to really have that authority. At the same time, you are there to really support them. But it's really important when you're leading a group, you establish that leadership and the authority. And it's something that, again, I am constantly working on to overcome. And I realize this is something that I know when I talk to my girlfriends, this is something that we're always guilty of. And so how do we overcome that? And I think, one of the ways is that you're just going to have to challenge yourself all the time. So that once you do it, then you'll gain the confidence. It's like public speaking, right? I think that's a classic example. I used to hate public speaking. I even took Toastmaster classes because I hated it so much. But then I knew I had to overcome it. And so I would go to these Toastmaster classes early morning and just really, force myself to get in front of people and speak. Now, it doesn't bother me at all. It's just a matter of, can I really make the time valuable to the audience is really my question. But again, in terms of the public speaking, no longer is a scary thought for me. And so again, really constantly challenging. I was also asked to serve on a board. It's a country club. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm so busy with my work. Why would I want to serve on a board? And I was asked because I was the only female. It was a it's a 12-member team board member, and they're all male. And I think, let's see, when I joined, it was all white male except there was one Asian American male. So I will be stepping into a board where I would not only be the only female, but I would be the Asian American female, right? And I had to really think about this because, again, not only the schedule conflict, all that, but why would I want to do this? And yes, of course, because I do care about the club, and the people that I would serve, but I took that on as a challenge. Because I was so engrossed in the Asian American community that I've actually never stepped out of that Asian American community, that I've actually not really been involved in an actual, in a board where it was predominantly Caucasian, let alone be male. So it was a challenge for me. And I decided, okay, this is a great learning experience. This is going to be a great learning experience. So I ended up taking on the board seat, and I still currently serve as a board, and I'll share some of the experiences with you as well. But again, when you have these opportunities where you sort of question, well, do I deserve it, or can I? I encourage you to take that step forward and take that challenge, because you learn so much if you hadn't otherwise. So it's constantly really challenging yourself to take on these roles that you may have passed on, but it really helps you to grow as a person, as a leader. Absolutely look for role models, mentors, support group, even your girlfriends. Whenever you have these self-doubts, I think it's really important for you to have someone that you can speak to and be able to really talk it over, and for that person or the group to really help you get yourself out of that self-doubt mode. Because, again, like I said, I do it all the time. And so whether it be my husband, or now I'm married, by the way, so whether it be my husband or my girlfriends or my mentors, that I would have to, if I can, whenever I have these doubts, I'll talk it over with them, and they're the ones like, you can do this. And you just sometimes just need to hear that from someone, to say that you can do this, right? That's all you need sometimes. So absolutely having that support group, mentors, the role models is something that I strongly encourage everyone to seek out. Number 4, this is something that, again, this is a constant work in progress. I think, I don't know, again, I'm speaking from my experience, right? And I'm very passionate, but I also, because I'm so passionate in everything that I do, I get very emotional. And so even in meetings, even at board meetings, when something really doesn't go right, I would become very emotional, and the way I would communicate, sometimes it'll come out with emotions. And I realized that is not the way to influence. When you're in a room full of males especially, they just look at you like, oh my God, here she goes again, right? So these are things that I'm still learning, that when I know I have to go to a board meeting and I have to present something that I really care about, I really prepare. I even make my husband listen to me and just give me, critique how I'm presenting it, and am I presenting it without emotion, but really kind of factual and persuasive. And because, and I'm just gonna say, for me, I think it's just me being female that I become very emotional, and I get sometimes really bogged down on details. So I'm always constantly asking myself to sort of step back and ask myself, why am I here? Why am I doing this? And what's my objective? What's the outcome that I want to drive towards? And sort of that really helps me to think and sort of go beyond that emotional state and be able to really speak persuasively to get the point across. And I still make so many mistakes on this part, and that's why I wanted to share this with you, because I do it all the time still, and I'm still working on it. But by sharing with you that, you'll also recognize, if you do this, for you to really step back and constantly remind yourself, and even practice it with others. If you have an important presentation, or if you have an important meeting where you really need to persuade the group, practice it, prepare it. And there are a lot of books and resources around how to talk, how to be persuasive. I think these are things that we, especially the topics, the issues that you care about, is where you really want to remove yourself from being emotional and be able to really be more professional, I guess, be more factual, and be more persuasive. And lastly, I'm sure you've all heard this, but dots do connect. And I can't speak enough about the random connections that I've made, even the works that I've done along the way, or the connections that I've made throughout my career. It's amazing how they come to connect with one another. One example, just a random example, where we were at a conference, and this was a large app conference in Santa Clara Convention Center, and because my team was working the booth, I had to take lunch for them, and typically they only have like sandwich and burgers, right? And so I decided to take sushi bento for my team. Had eaten, and then after my team had eaten, I came down and was just eating sushi bento, and before you know it, every person passing by would stop and say, "Where did you get that?" Right? Because they're like, okay, they certainly did not have that at the wherever they were at the lunch cafeteria. And so literally we could not, my team member, and we could not eat, because we would just, as soon as we pick up something, someone would come over and says, asks us, where did you get the bento? So there were two guys sitting next to us, Isaac and Zoe. They would basically laugh, and every time someone came over, they would say, "Hi, my name is Zoe. What do you do?" They were basically networking. While we were being asked where we got the bento, every time someone came over, and it was literally every second, they would actually take that opportunity to network. And so it was so funny that, when we got the chance, I'm like, okay, so what do you do? And it turned out that they were from Santa Monica, Southern Cal, and they were here to meet with John from Hyundai Ventures, which happens to be a good friend of mine. So I said, and they already knew his schedule. Like he was speaking at some gig the next day, so they were gonna go crash there to meet with him. I'm like, oh, that's really funny. He's a good friend. So I made him take a picture, and I texted over to John. I said, hey John, there are two guys here who would really love to meet you. And then, guess what? John happened to be at the conference. So he ended up coming over, saying hello to these two guys. And then they ended up actually arranging a meeting. And then 3 months later, Zoe and Isaac emails me, thank you so much. We struck up a partnership with Hyundai. And so now they got the Hyundai cars, where it's a wave car, and they do advertising on all the cars. And so they were able to strike up a partnership. Just a random chance. But again, by connecting, and this is something that I share with all of our entrepreneurs, you never know. You never know how dots are going to connect. Whenever you go, be nice, be respectful, be helpful, be supportive, because you never know when that's going to come back around and help you in a critical time. Even just yesterday, we were at a conference at Levi Stadium. Just randomly, as I was walking out, this gentleman comes over and says, hello, Claire, and I'm like, oh shoot, I know him, but I couldn't remember his name. 2 years ago, that was 2 years ago that I had met with them. It turns out that he was working for Airbus Innovation and Accelerator. And one of my companies in my cohort right now was already working with Airbus in France, but then he wasn't really moving forward. And so he really needed to kind of, figure out how to move forward with the next step. Guess what? I'm like, Doctor, you come over here, meet Taylor. So they're actually having a meeting downstairs today. So these kind of random connections are always happening all around me. And so I can't tell you enough how important it is to connect. And I think the rule of thumb is be helpful. Whenever you have the opportunity to help others, be helpful. Because when you need that help, you never know who you're going to have to ask. And if you were helpful, they'll remember. And they'll be the first one to step up and try to help you, right? And when it comes to, again, female founders, female colleagues, if we can support one another, if we have that huge network that we talk, that would really help us to get to the next level. I think that's where we can really rise above and be able to really take the more leadership that we can take, the more help that we can give to one another. I know we're going to talk about investments. How do we, if we can get more investors, if we can get more women in the partnership level at the VC firms, that they're going to be, that we can go and seek investments. That's where we're going to have to really help one another to help them get there as well. So with that, I will conclude my talk and maybe take a few questions. Okay? Female venture capitalists. So I guess number one, we have to have more females coming from the financial sector, because when you look at venture capitalists, where do they come from? They either come from the investment banking, right? They have that financial background, or they themselves have been an entrepreneur. Most of the time, they, successful entrepreneur. So if we can support more female founders to be successful, where they have an awesome, successful exit, then hopefully they'll then turn that into and I believe there are already quite a few, into a fund where they can then support female entrepreneurs. Does that answer your question? Okay. Yes.
Hi, Wanda. Thank you so much for your talk. I really related to how you would go back and forth between the U.S. and Asia. I go back and forth between here and Myanmar, where my family has a business, and I would love to hear you talk more about that experience going back and forth between those cultures, because I would love to build the ecosystem there. and like serve as a way to build that community?
Sure. I go back to Korea every other month, so I go back quite often. And whenever I go, I host this IgniteXL social, so that we're inviting our past, the graduates of our programs, as well as any entrepreneurs who are interested in, let's say, Silicon Valley or the global markets. We do get quite a bit of female founders to come, and one of the things that I do is I really try to encourage them. I try to really encourage them that they too can think about global business. Oftentimes, especially female entrepreneurs, they tend to work on, a lot of times they're like non-tech, and then they'll just really look at domestic markets, because I think also they don't have enough role models that's had successful global business that they built, that they just don't think of themselves as doing something, anything too global. And so that's one of the things that I do, is to try to talk to as many female entrepreneurs when they come to these kind of networking events. What else do I do? Whenever I go to these, so I go to also remote areas too, not just Seoul, which is pretty metropolitan, but I go to all these like remote areas, regions, and I try to have office hours so that anyone who is remotely interested in global business to come and talk to me. Because when we put out an application for our programs, the number of applicants that we get is, I would say, let's say, if they're like not even 5%. And the reason is because most of the time they don't feel confident enough. They don't feel that, oh, how can I possibly go to the US market, right? It's this lack of self-confidence. So that's something that I'm trying to really help them overcome. Not that everybody should be coming, but at least I want them to start thinking about, can I possibly build a business that's for the global markets? And so I try to do a lot of one-on-one. I try to do a lot of speaking at universities as well. I love talking to university students because they're just so open-minded. They're so energetic. So try to just get the word out, try to encourage them, try to sort of give them a little exposure of what Silicon Valley is like, what it means to really build, be a global entrepreneur. Does that help? Okay.
So you're going to be around for a minute or two after this talk?
Yes. I'll be here about 15 more minutes or so, and then I'll
Okay.
kick off. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're going to take a short break, and we're going to be here at 3:30 to learn how to build culture in your company. So hiring a team, building culture. See you soon.